We have our scripture reading is in Mark chapter 8. So if you don't have a Bible with you, that's okay. There's Bibles in the seats in front of you. You can pull those out. And in those Bibles, I think it's page 792. We are in Mark chapter 8. We're going to be reading Mark chapter 8, verse 27 through 38. And I'm going to have Jason read the scripture for us. Considering this is his last Sunday, I'm going to make him work for it. So Mark chapter 8. Starting in verse 27, if you want to read along with us, I'll have it up here on the screen as well. Go ahead, Jason.
And Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they told him, "John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." And he strictly charged them to tell no one about him. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Okay, last week I told you about my retreat to the woods. We discussed the parables of fasting, the belief in chairs, and how it all related to this passage. So you can check that out online. We have all of our services online. But I also told you that my retreat was only part of my week. I've got another story for you, another parable. But I'm going to start out with traditional sermon stuff on this passage first, which we read last week as well, because before we can move on to chapter 9 in Mark, you need to fully understand this story. And it starts in verse 27. So this is Who Do You Say That I Am? Part 2. The very first verse here. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. So important to know where this is. Where Jesus and his disciples are during this conversation is very, very important. Caesarea Philippi is up here, so it's north of Galilee. This is where Jesus does most of his ministry. And then he goes about 25 miles north to Caesarea Philippi, and it is a beautiful place. Thanks to a once-in-a-lifetime trip gifted to Nikki and I from my parents who are here this morning. I've actually been to Caesarea Philippi, and this is my pictures, my camera that I took these pictures with. And next to the garden tomb where they say that Jesus actually was buried and then rose again. That's my favorite spot in Jerusalem, in all of Israel actually, that I've seen. But this is my second favorite. Second favorite spot. It's so lush. The grounds are immaculately maintained. It's got cliffs. It's got trees. It's got water, including a 30-foot high waterfall. I loved being there. And it's been like this for centuries. Look at those people. It's been like this for centuries. Really, actually, it's been like this for thousands of years. It's been a place of worship since the Old Testament times. Actually, even before the Israelites came into this area, it was a place where Baal was worshipped. I don't know if you recognize that name, B-A-A-L, Baal, god of Baal. They call them Baal Hermon because it's at the foot of Mount Hermon. And then during the time of the Greeks, when the Greeks took over this area, it was a place of worship for the god of the wild, which is Pan. They literally call this place Pan's Grotto. Grotto means a cave or a dwelling in a garden, and these caves are still there today, again, from my own camera. There's carvings of Baal and of Pan in the actual stones right there, all the way through, and you can see some of those there in this picture. And you actually know this god Pan. We all know this god by a few different names in our culture. There's Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream, if you've ever seen that show. Nikki just directed that very recently. There's also Peter Pan. That also comes from the same kind of, he's mischievous and he's wild. And also Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. I don't know if you've seen this. It's very scary. Don't see it if you're young. But this is just a fun fact. The guy who played Pan in Pan's Labyrinth is this guy named Doug Jones. This is him getting into makeup for this character, and I've actually performed with him. He's the most famous person I've ever performed with on stage before. I don't know if I remember telling you this, but I was an actor in my former life, and we were in a play called The Okie Chronicles. It was really dumb. But this is Doug here on the side, and that's actually me with hair. This is me right here. So this is back in 2004, maybe 2005, back when we were in LA pursuing the whole acting thing. Doug is just an amazing guy. He's a very strong Christian, very humble. Anyway, none of this really has to do with anything. He was the Silver Surfer. He was in The Shape of Water. Blah, blah. Okay, let's get to the actual thing here. I actually did act. That's just what I want to prove to you. I actually did it, and I did it with some famous people. Okay, so this is a place of worship for many, many different gods in Caesarea Philippi. And Jesus chooses the journey from Galilee to this place to begin a crucial dialogue with the disciples about worshiping gods. On the way, he asks his disciples, so on the way to this place where all these gods are worshipped, he asks his disciples, who do people say that I am? And they told him, John the Baptist. And others said Elijah, and others one of the prophets. And it's kind of fun to think about the modern equivalent to this conversation today. Ask anyone about Jesus in 2023. You're going to get a wide variety of responses as to who he is. And most of the people you're going to ask about who do you think Jesus is, they're going to think they're right. Back then, it was John the Baptist. People were saying, he must be John the Baptist, because they were both outsiders with large followings, both talking about repentance and challenging the religious leaders of the time. They also thought maybe he was Elijah because he was the one prophet who actually never died. In the Old Testament, he was taken up in a chariot. And he was talked about in other books of the Old Testament as being associated with the Messiah, with the coming king. And many Jews, even today, believe that Elijah himself is going to be the Messiah, or he is the Messiah. And Elijah will be coming back, maybe in a chariot, to come and save all of Israel. And then the disciples said, other prophets maybe, because Jesus talked a lot like the other prophets at that time, that they had memorized and they could quote. And they would read each Sabbath in the temple. And there's a very good reason that Jesus sounded like the prophets of the Old Testament, because Jesus is God in human flesh, and the prophets only spoke the words of God. So it made sense that these are the things that people thought he might be. That's what they said about Jesus back then. I wonder, today, what would they say about Jesus right now? Jesus is in a lot of popular culture today. We just had the Jesus Revolution movie, I think just left theaters recently. There's always Jesus conferences. We have The Chosen, which I've recommended. There's some things in it that are not exactly scriptural, but overall, it actually has a really good depiction of who Jesus is and the disciples. We've been talking a lot also about sharing our faith and how it can be as simple as praying for people, and they don't even know that we're doing it, but we're praying for their salvation, praying for an opportunity to share. We've talked about bringing a Bible to a public place, like a coffee shop, and letting just that simple act of having a Bible on the table start a conversation, as it has for me, as I've shared my testimony many times over the past few months. So here's another one. What if you were genuinely curious with a friend that you know isn't a Christian? What if you just asked them sincerely, what do you think of Jesus? I know that even that question could be too bold for some of you, but I can almost guarantee that if you prayed for God to give you an opportunity to ask this question to someone that you care about, I think he'd answer yes, that he would give you that opportunity, because it's his will for others to know about him. And if you remember our point from a few weeks ago, I don't have it actually up here on the screen because we've said it multiple times. It is your first fill in the blank. If you'd like bullets in there on the back table there, you can follow along. There's not that many this morning. We usually have much more, but God uses his believing children, that's the blank right there. He uses his believing children to reach his unbelieving children. That's who he uses. So if you ask that question, if you asked one of your friends, someone you care about, what do you think about Jesus? I think it'd be fun to see what they said. And you wouldn't have to correct them or anything. I'm not asking you to do anything more than just ask. Just ask, hear their answer. And then if you want to just move on, just move on. What you have done is planted a seed. You have done something that God can use now. He can take that seed and he can water it and it can grow. Because again, it's not up to us to change anyone's mind or to convince anyone or bring them to salvation. That's God's job. But it is our job to plant seeds. So that's your challenge this week for those who are willing to try it. I believe you'll be blessed by the experience. Let's get to the actual answer to this question, though. There could be a million different responses to this question, but there are many that are popular even today. Jesus is a good teacher of morals. He taught people how to be good. That's somewhat true, or at least it's partially true. People say he was a man of peace. That's definitely true. He loved people. He made sure that they were healed from their diseases, as well as he loved their relationships, and he wanted to heal their friendships and their relationships. He wants to heal our relationship with God. He is a man of peace. A religious leader. I mean, you can't really deny that. It's true. I mean, Christianity is a religion. Religion has a bad connotation to it, but it has actually good meaning for it as well. Or Jesus, just a nice guy, buddy Christ. Just a really cool dude. He is a very nice guy. He was very nice. But all these things are, at the best, partial truths. Then there's other religions who have taken Jesus and placed him in their own narratives. I don't know if you know this, but Muslims believe in Jesus. They call him Isa. And they believe he was a great prophet, not the Son of God, not the second member of the Trinity, not the one who dies and saves us from our sins, not that Jesus, but they believe that the original Gospels were true. In the Quran, if you've read it, and I have, it actually says, believe the Gospels. But when you ask my Muslim friends, and I have a couple friends that I've been able to have, actually even they're imams, actual leaders, religious leaders. And when I ask them, oh, so you guys believe the Gospel? They say, no, you corrupted it. You corrupted the Gospel. We believe the original Gospel. I'm like, well, where is it? Like, well, it's not here anymore. We don't have it anymore. Like, well, that's convenient. But they do believe in Jesus, in a sense. They actually believe that Jesus will help usher in the end of the world, not as the Savior of the world, but he will help Muhammad and Allah. Jesus also is in Buddhist literature. Buddhists believe that Jesus was a Buddha, a great spiritual leader who achieved nirvana. And again, Christians sort of corrupted Jesus' story and made him into a god when he wasn't supposed to be. That's their belief. Mormons believe that Jesus was a spirit child of Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, and that he is a spirit brother of Satan. And when they were all hanging out as a family before the world was created, Jesus volunteered to be the savior of this world. Satan got jealous and decided to fight against his brother. And of course, they were all white, but that's different. Different thing. But that's just some of the practical real-world applications of the passage. There are many different opinions on Jesus, but the most important opinion lies within you. Not because you're the ultimate decider of who Jesus truly is. Don't get too arrogant. But because your answer to this question determines your eternal destiny. In other words, what you believe about Jesus is your second fill in the blank. What you believe about Jesus determines your eternal destiny. It's that important. It's why Jesus asked them the question, but who do you say that I am? Buddy Jesus is a funny meme. Muslim Jesus is an important prophet. Mormon Jesus has a fun backstory. We didn't even talk about how he appeared to white-skinned Native Americans who had traveled to America from Jerusalem in the 600 BCs and after his resurrection. And sadly, those white Native Americans were killed by brown Native Americans who had the curse of Cain upon them. This is all true, by the way. This is from the Mormon literature. But none of these Jesuses are true. Most importantly, none of them save. If you believe that Jesus was a good guy who said and did some great things, that's awesome. If you try to live by his example, even better. If you pray to him, if you read his words, if you go to church, that is wonderful. But none of it actually matters. Not really. Especially if the Jesus that you like, the Jesus that you have in your mind, the Jesus that you worship is not the Jesus of the Bible. The Jesus of the Bible, the only Jesus that saves, is the only Son of God, the Christ, the Messiah, the chosen one, God in human flesh, come to die for all of our sin, the one who rose on the third day, defeating death and sin once and for all. If you don't have a relationship with that Jesus, if you don't have a relationship with the true biblical Jesus, then you are not saved. We have to get this right. We can't mess around with this. The stakes are too high. So let's see what the disciples say in response to Jesus' question. Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." Peter got it. Jesus is the Christ, the Greek word for Messiah, the anointed heavenly king, prophesied for thousands of years, come to rule and reign forever and ever. So if he got it right, why does Jesus then say, don't say anything about this? The answer actually is really simple. They didn't have enough information. They had the wrong idea still in their heads as to what the Messiah was going to do, especially in that time period. Remember, the Jewish people were underneath Roman rule. They wanted the Messiah to come and destroy the Romans, to take them out, to come and take out the Roman rule and then to establish a new kingdom where you think about it, they, as the closest to Jesus, would probably be elevated to a really high status. So Jesus is going to rule and reign as king, and then they are going to sit on his right and his left, and they're going to rule and reign as well. There's some arrogance in this as well for them. Just like everyone at the wrong time, at the same time, they had the wrong idea what the Messiah was meant to do, who the Messiah's true identity was, namely that the Messiah was going to suffer and die for his people, which is what Jesus then goes on to say. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly. This is actually the first time that Jesus had laid it all out for them. If you've been reading along with us, we started in Mark chapter 1 many years ago, and then we were now in Mark chapter 8. He's never said this before as plainly as he said it now, and he's saying it very plainly now. So they should have known. They or anyone else at the time who knew the Old Testament, just paid attention to the scriptures, they would see the truth that they knew the Messiah was going to suffer. Let's just look at a few examples. We'll go to Psalm and we'll go to Isaiah. Psalm chapter 22. My God, this is the Messiah speaking. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night I find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned in the praises of Israel. In you our fathers trusted. They trusted, you delivered them. To you they cried and were rescued. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. Yet you are he who took me from the womb. You made me trust you at my mother's breasts. These are words that are so familiar to the Jesus story. We referenced these verses when we were talking about Easter. The Pharisees said the same thing to Jesus. They fulfilled the prophecy in Psalm 22. Hundreds of years later, the Pharisees are saying the same thing to the Messiah on the cross. Well, he saved others. He cannot save himself. This is Matthew. The words are almost exactly as Psalm 22. He saved others. He cannot save himself. That's what the Pharisees are saying to Jesus on the cross. If he's the king of Israel, let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him when he comes down. Let's keep going in Psalm 22. This is the Messiah speaking. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. For dogs encompass me. A company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Whose hands and feet were nailed and pierced? Whose clothing was cast by others by lots? John 19, when the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, 1 part for each soldier, also his tunic. This is the Messiah. This is the fulfillment of the Messiah. Isaiah 53, we've read this before. He was despised. This is Isaiah speaking. He was despised and rejected by men. He's talking about the Messiah. A man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised. And we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. And with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to slaughter, like a sheep before its shearers is silent, he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, and as for his generation, who was considered that he was cut off from the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. And they made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man in his death, and although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth, yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief. When his soul makes an offering for guilt, he shall see his offspring. He shall prolong his days. The will of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. Out of the anguish of his soul he shall see and be satisfied. By his knowledge shall the righteous one, my servant, make many to be accounted righteous, and he shall bear their iniquities. He poured out his soul to death and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he bore the sin of many, and he makes intercession for the transgressors. This is the prophecy of the Messiah. Two more, really quickly. Zechariah. And I will pour out in the house of David, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, a spirit of grace and pleas for mercy, so that when they look upon me, on him whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him as one weeps for a firstborn. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who stands next to me, declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. It has been clear from the beginning what the Messiah's mission would look like, but Peter and the disciples don't remember those verses, or at least they seem to have just missed and ignored those verses. And what Jesus says at the end of his description, he says, yes, I will suffer, but look, yes, all these things will happen. Suffer many things, be rejected by the elders, just like Psalm said, and Zechariah said, and Isaiah said, and the chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly. Yes, he's going to die, but he also will rise again. But Peter focuses in on the rejection and the suffering and the killing. And honestly, we can understand that, right? Because I think we would probably do the same thing. After all, think about following Jesus. But put yourself in the disciples' position. You're following your Messiah, the chosen one, the one that's been talked about for thousands of years. He's finally here. You're so excited about what he's going to do. He's going to rule and reign, and all those things are going to be great. You're not remembering the whole thing about being suffering and all that stuff like that, but all that's going to be great. And then you hear him speaking about his suffering and his death, and you're thinking, this isn't good. Because we're following you, and if you're going to go suffer and die, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for me if I'm following you? If they're going to kill you, what is going to happen to me? So Peter does his best to respect Jesus as he corrects him. And I think it's good. He took him aside. That's a good thing. If you're going to correct your leader, take him aside. Don't do it in front of everyone. I think this is a good example of things to do. But still, it takes a lot of arrogance to recognize Jesus as the Messiah and then to correct the Messiah. My goodness. There's a Jewish word for this. It's called chutzpah. If you would like to learn and it's a good Jewish word because you can really get a lot of spittle when you say chutzpah. It just comes right out. Chutzpah, it's this unbelievable gall, this insolence, this audacity, this chutzpah. Peter had such chutzpah saying to Jesus, hey, Jesus, come here. Yeah. We love you. Everything you're saying is great. Thank you so much for everything you've done, healing people, blah, blah, blah. Could you please not talk about the whole death and dying thing because it's bumming people out. And also we're thinking about ourselves and this is not a good thing. But Jesus is having none of it. You can see his response. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, get behind me, Satan. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. There's so much to this passage. I want you to be careful not to read Jesus' words as being said in anger. Because honestly, that's the wrong interpretation. There is anger within the statement, for sure. But let me give you some psychoeducation from therapist Zach. For those of you who don't know him. My last semester of my master's, almost going to be a licensed therapist. Well, actually, I got many hours that I need to put. But basically, I'm back to graduate. And anger is a secondary emotion. I like this picture of an anger iceberg. Yeah, you see anger, but actually what's underneath anger is most important. This is really just good for all your relationships. You see someone that's angry, it's not just about their anger. Go deeper than that. For yourself, you feel angry. It's not actually about your anger. Go deeper than that. What is going on underneath? There's always something else going on, and that's the thing you need to pinpoint. So what is going on with Jesus here? The hint is in the beginning of verse 33, seeing his disciples. How does he see his disciples? What do you think Jesus feels when he sees his disciples? What are his thoughts towards them? These are men and women. Remember, there's men and women. It wasn't the 12, or else Mark would have said the 12. But he said his disciples. And disciples have been clear throughout all of Mark's gospel. Disciples could number up to 70, 100 disciples that Jesus had. So these are men and women who had left everything to follow him. Now think of Jesus' perspective on that. That is a heavy responsibility to take people from everything that they know in life and to say, follow me. He's responsible for them. Here they are on the final leg of their journey. Jesus knows this. They don't fully know this. But Jesus knows this is the final leg of their journey. They're going from Caesarea Philippi. They're going to pass through Galilee really quick, but then they're going to Jerusalem. And what's going to happen in Jerusalem? He's going to suffer, and he's going to die. It's going to get very dark. He also knows what's waiting for them after. Remember Zechariah? Awake, O sword, against my shepherd. My shepherd is the Messiah. Against the man who stands next to me. God is saying, this is the Trinity here. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. Jesus knows this. He knows what's going to happen. They're going to scatter after he is crucified. Can you do your best to try to see through the eyes of Jesus in this moment? He knows that in a few days he will be beaten within an inch of his life. That almost every single disciple who is with him now will actually abandon him. That he will be nailed to a cross and hang for hours until his last breath. He also knows the fate of the disciples, that they will be devastated by his suffering, crushed by his death. They will hide in fear for their own lives. That Judas, one of the disciples that he loves the most, will give in to Satan's temptation, betray him, and then Judas will go and kill himself. That there will be great joy after his resurrection, but shortly thereafter, after this resurrection, there will be a lot of persecution for those who believe in Jesus. All of them will die. The majority of them will die as a martyr's death, meaning they were dying for Jesus' death. The only one who dies in old age is John, and even then, he was boiled alive. They were beaten and tortured and imprisoned, and eventually most of them will lose their lives because of their faith in him. This is what Jesus is facing, and he's trying to prepare them for what's to come, and I don't think it's easy for him to talk about it. We know this is the case because of how hard he prays in the garden. Right before his crucifixion, he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And there appeared an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, though still, even with the angel strengthening him, he prayed more earnestly, the same kind of prayer. And his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Yes, he was God, but he was human, able to feel every whip across his back, every thorn on his head, every nail in his hand and feet, not to mention the weight of every soul's sin, past, present, future on his shoulders. And if that wasn't enough, how could we even begin to comprehend what it would feel like to be the second person of the Trinity, to be forsaken from that relationship for that time on the cross? Because God can't be with sin, so he forsakes his own son. My God, why have you forsaken me, is what the Messiah says in Psalm 22, and it's what Jesus says in Matthew 27. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? The only thing keeping him going in his human state was what lies beyond the cross. As Hebrews so beautifully puts it, Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and he's seated at the right hand of the throne of God. It was the joy that was before him that said, I can do this because of the joy of what I know is coming. All of this is going on in Jesus' mind. Probably a million other things that we don't even fully know or understand. But the bottom line is he loves his disciples so much. In a very real sense, he doesn't want what's going to happen to them to happen. And yet he knows it must happen. That it's ultimately the greatest act of love in all the world. It will save billions from everlasting separation from God. So anything that's going to take him off of an already impossible task is from Satan. It's like he's saying to Peter, come on, man. This is hard enough to do it without you telling me I need to stop talking about it. He calls Peter Satan because Satan is a title, the adversary, the tempter, the deceiver, the liar, the one who resists God's will. Peter is called Satan because he's thinking like Satan. It's all about the world. It's all about comfort. It's all about the temporary. Think about the temptation from Satan in Matthew 4. Jesus, you're hungry. Turn those stones into bread. Don't tempt me, Satan. Jesus, you want all this? I'll give you everything. Just worship me. Don't tempt me, Satan. Yes, I want to do these things. That's why it's a temptation. Of course, it would be easier to give in to temptation. It's always easier to give in. It's way harder to resist. But this is the point. It's so much easier to say you believe in Jesus and believing in Jesus is like going to the gym or having a vegan diet, like it's a lifestyle that works for you, but it might not work for everyone. That's easier to say. Yeah, this is just good for me. But it's not the truth. It's not true Christianity. True Christianity requires sacrifice, saying, no, I believe this is true, and I believe it's true for everyone. It's not just true for me. Because we know this, it isn't just true for us. There are people who are depending upon us. And true Christianity requires sacrifice, laying down your own life, just as Jesus did. Okay, this is me and my friend, Officer Carr. I went on a ride along. That's what I did that week. So after I went up to the woods, I spent time with Jesus alone, I went on a ride along with the Sacramento Police Department with my friend, Officer Carr. I got up at 3:30 in the morning to go do it. It was crazy, but it was really amazing. The very first thing that we did is that we got in the car and then he showed me how to look up license plates. So I was just like looking at license plates and typing them in and finding out if anybody had any outstanding warrants or, their insurance was, or their registration was late. It was really fun. The first call, we had a crazy lady in a hotel and had to take care of that. That was pretty cool too. Then we went for breakfast, which was fun because there was no calls. So we were just hanging out, just me and a bunch of cops in this cop restaurant. Just me and everybody else all eating together. And then there was a second call. This is after breakfast. A man with a knife was threatening his family. He turned on the lights, turned on the sirens. We were going, I think, 70, 75 in a 35, weaving in and out of traffic. It was nuts. And on the way, this is what he said to me. Zach, you have no protection. You have no gun. You have no authority in these situations, so I need you to listen to me very closely. You have to stay right next to me the entire time. If there's danger, you stand behind me. If I have to leave the vehicle and chase someone, you stay in the car. If I signal you to come out, you can come out, but you stay right next to me. If I get in a fight and I'm winning, be a good witness. If I get in a fight and start losing, it would be great if you helped. All that being said, you need to sign this form saying that whatever happens to you today, you are aware of the dangers, which includes potential injury and death. On that drive to that second call, everything became more real. It wasn't fun anymore. There was a 911 call for help. A woman was being threatened by a relative with a knife. An Officer Carr was speeding, weaving in and out of traffic, running red lights, driving as safely as possible, but taking the risk he might get sideswiped to save this woman's life and the lives of the other family members that are in that house. He flew out of the car on arrival, hand on his gun, shouting for the man to drop the knife, turn around, put his hands behind his back. Anything could have happened in that moment. Officer Carr, as so many brave men and women do every single day, they come to work in the morning not knowing if they will be back home in the evening. To truly protect and serve, police officers are ready to sacrifice their desires for the good of others. And I don't know that there's a better parallel for discipleship. After calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. Fortunately, the man complied without resisting. Once the scene was safe and had backup, he called me out of the car. And if it wasn't clear already that I was not an asset to the police department, it was clear at that very moment as I shakily got out of the car to stand next to Officer Carr. And here's where the parable gets very real for me. In this parable, who is Officer Carr and who am I? I can do nothing without him. I am not him. I'm a representative, so I need to follow him closely and be prepared to give my life, especially if he needs me. Can you imagine if I said no to him? Hey, no, if you get in a fight and start to lose, I'm going to stay in the car. Or actually, honestly, I'm going to run away. Saying, I'm not a cop. I don't work for the force. I don't even know this guy. Because I care more about me and my safety. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. As Officer Carr was booking the man that he had arrested, I took the time to get to know the man and his story. Not surprisingly, he was on drugs. Also not surprisingly, he had been through a ton of trauma. And by the time he was ready to be transferred to holding, all three of us had become closer. And Officer Carr asked right before then, for releasing him to the holding cell, he asked if he could pray for him before placing him in the cell, and the man was genuinely shocked and touched. So we prayed for him right there, in the middle of the jail. Because as important as arresting him and booking him was to keep him and the others around him safe, the most important thing in this man's life is his eternal salvation, found only in Jesus, the Messiah, the one who laid down his life for ours, and he asks us to do the same. The only question is, will we?